working from home with Canadian Glen Sutherland has been an absolute blast. Met some awesome people, immersed myself in Texas history, culture, and enjoyed a lot of barbecue. I mean, a lot of barbecue because it's easy to find, and pretty much every restaurant serves brisket, and even the Chinese restaurants serve brisket. I'm not one to collect souvenirs, but I really like Texas a lot. And more than anywhere else I've traveled, it's just that perfect mix of entrepreneurial environment and culture. It's landlord-friendly. It's affordable real estate, and everyone is so nice. Honestly, folks in Texas were more nice than back home, the GTA. And we Canadians are known for being nice. Honestly, the Texas drivers in Texas are pretty nicer as well. On Tuesday morning, I met a Austinite, a new Austinite in Shiraz Ali, who reached out to me actually for Facebook. He commented on my posts saying, hey, we should connect. I'm here as well. He's down from Winnipeg. He moved up to Winnipeg a couple months ago to be with his wife, who is originally from Boston and still lives in Boston. So now Shiraz lives in Boston. He was kind enough to invite us to one of his split properties and share with us his renovation plan. It was a tired house by an elderly couple, and he got it brought off a wholesaler. He was sharing his experience with the local market, what makes it different than back in Canada. I also was the one that informed them that in Ontario things are pretty bad. And now I saw paralegals say the other day that it's now 9 months. So now 9 months to get a hearing at the Landlord-Tenant Board. And I caught him off guard. Again, he's Canadian, but again, he doesn't focus on Ontario. He's from Winnipeg. He's now here in Austin. He was telling me about what property defects to look out for, specifically structural issues caused by heavy clay soil, which Texas is known for. And then you mix in the problems with droughts followed by heavy rains. That tends to make the land shift and turn cause structural issues. He shared with me challenges in hiring contractors and renovators, and still sourcing materials. It's still crazy out there. And for those who don't know, the unemployment in the U.S. remains stubbornly low, around 4%. That's it's below our own, which we're about low fives. Even with interest rates expected at current peak levels, one has to think about what's going to happen to inflation in the U.S. when rates are cut, which are expected to come this year. The market actually predicts 6 cuts. I know. The U.S. Fed said they do 3 cuts. That's what they said they'll do. The market thinks different. I have my own theories on what to do to, how to invest based on the current macro environment, and hence you see me raising cash in order to invest in the U.S. Funny enough, down here in the States, on Monday, the local schools were closed due to cold weather. These cold snaps. So for actually a couple of days in Texas, the temperature dipped below was like 70 degrees Celsius. So pipes were freezing. Thank goodness there was no snow or anything like that causing like traffic accidents. But again, pipes were freezing. Texans seem to not be so used to having to deal with the sub-freezing temperature. And again, they're not used to having winterized pipes. I actually have a picture of a pipe burst at a mall in San Antonio, Texas. In Canada, we would never have, generally we don't have pipes that are exposed to the outdoor elements. And these folks are funny. Anyways, sorry, that was pedestrian bridge in San Antonio. Anyways, so on Tuesday, we actually moved from our accommodation from downtown Austin. I was accompanying my brother. That's a nice way of saying it. I was mooching off my brother's hotel room at a resort. About 16 minutes from downtown. He's at, my brother works for a very large multinational. We were staying at a resort because his company is having a big international conference there. Anyways, at the resort, they had 4 18-hole golf courses. 4 of them. That's absolutely incredible. I've never heard of that. Like, there's not really more. There's very few courses that have more than 2 18-hole courses. This one had 4. Anyways, it is incredible how affordable housing is, and the land in the most expensive town in Texas. Unfortunately, it was too cold for golf, and honestly didn't have enough time to go play around. As honestly, my priority was more meeting real estate investors and working on real estate. So after our check-in, my cousin and I, who made the trip down as well, him and I drove down that busy corridor, actually the busiest corridor in Texas, the highway corridor, 81 miles or so. That same drive, about 81-mile stretch, parts of it are 100,000 cars travel on it per day. It's to San Antonio to see some historical sites. Specifically, we want to see the Alamo, which is the site of a major battle that was partly that helped decide Texas's independence from Mexico. We walked around the San Antonio Riverwalk. If you haven't been, I highly recommend it. San Antonio, I had no idea it was such a pretty town. And it's incredible how much money has been invested into that downtown to make it so nice. I honestly haven't seen anything like that back home in Canada. Maybe it has something to do with, actually taking advantage of oil. Anyways, it was an iconic area filled with bridges, bars, and restaurants. But for best-in-class barbecue, we had to leave downtown. So we hopped back into our rental Toyota Prius. Oh, the irony of driving around Texas in the Prius, among all the super-sized SUV pickup trucks, to dine on some of the finest barbecue in the city. This time around, I had smoked turkey and sausage. Just to try something different. Interestingly enough, on the way from Austin to San Antonio, we took a toll road. So from what I saw, it was faster and fun use this fact. Because we had out-of-state license plates on our Prius, there was actually no way for the auto tolling system. The highway was straight, it was fast, but I also noticed that there's very little development along that toll road. Kind of like the 407. The 407 has some development on it back home in the Golden Horseshoe, but compared to the 401 or the QEW, way more developed. So same thing. What I experienced on the ride home, we took the non-toll road from San Antonio back to incredibly developed for an 81-mile stretch. It's fascinating. And I did some ChatGPT, and that's how I found out that there's that stretch of road is traveled on by about 100,000 cars a day. And I was also studying this area because it makes a lot of sense for investing because it's located between two major economic centers, two of the top towns for investment in Texas. And it's also on the direct path to Monterrey, Mexico, which is booming economically. So that's worthy of a ChatGPT search for yourself as well. If you want to learn more about what's going on economically in terms of manufacturing, reshoring that's going on in Monterrey, Mexico. Monterrey is also home to round up Texas experience. I'm a geek. You all know this. I shop at Costco once a week and spend hundreds of dollars there. So I had to stop in at a Texas Costco, and I was impressed. Everything truly is bigger in Texas. The size of the store was honestly like double the size of the one that I go to in Burlington. And they also had about double the variety. The meat looked amazing, as you'd expect a Texas steak to look, and it was less expensive. For someone who's cheap, who likes meat, I was very excited. We needed gas, obviously, on the way home, and we stopped at Buc-ee's. So if you're familiar with Buc-ee's, you know what I'm talking about. It's an enormous gas station. I think there's like 100 gas pumps. And of course, I looked over and I also saw I counted 23 Tesla superchargers. This place is a humongous grocery store. It's just huge. It's like the size of a Canadian Tire. Except they sell, these guys, the Buc-ee's sell pretty good brisket barbecue sandwiches. They also sell a variety of other things like, hats, t-shirts, all sorts of variety. That's camp stoves, gun cases, and the largest variety of jerky I've ever seen. I should also mention I picked up at the Costco. I picked up a $14 bottle of Pinot Grigio called Banshee. So if you see a Pinot Grigio by Banshee, I recommend you pick it up. My friends and I opened it up together. I didn't mention anything about the price, but everyone was impressed. And then they were even more impressed when I told them it was only $14 American. I checked it. Yes, I'm going to talk about real estate eventually. This is a real estate show. I did check out a bunch of properties on Wednesday, new construction, and I even did a self-guided open house. I was confused because I'm looking at listings in the States, and some of them list open houses between like 10 to 6 p.m., 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., like 6 days a week, which I didn't understand. No realtor just sits in the property and just waits for people to show up. So when I went to the property that I wanted to see, they had the for sale sign on the lawn, had a QR code. The company is called Open Door. Which led me to their app, and I filled out my contact details, I took pictures of my driver's license, and then I was able to unlock the front door, which was totally awesome. I didn't have to engage with a lawyer to look at a property that I'm not qualified to buy yet. And this house, I've been studying for a little bit. I love the house. If I was liquid, I would be ready to run it right now. 1,800 square foot, no foundation cracks, like Shiraz warned me about. I walked the perimeter of the house looking for cracks. 4-bedroom, 2 full bath. Location is in the town, so no new construction houses or apartment buildings compete directly with me. The elementary school are 4 drive away, and the big upside is 8 minutes away with the $17 billion investment by Samsung to build a microchip manufacturing plant that will employ 2,000 people. This is how I invest for economic fundamentals that will cause upward pressures on my rent and resale price. No rent control means my cash flow continuously improves. High-level numbers, the house was asking about $325,000 in the buyer's market, so I know I can get less. The rent is about $2,100 plus rent, plus utilities, no condo fees. If you can beat those numbers with something with similar ease of investment, but significant upside, please let me know, and I'll have you on the show. Just know, if you're going to make frugal promises, like a 6-figure income on $50,000 investment, I will laugh at you on the show. We'll put it out. I went to see some new constructions at houses as well, like I mentioned, but they just didn't feel right. There wasn't like community feel. When the sales agent told me that the elementary school was 3 miles away, which is about 5 kilometers. Like, who lives 5 kilometers away from their elementary school? I'm targeting families for these properties. So anyways, otherwise the houses look great. The prices were great. The rents were great. The sales agent let me know, informed me that every property that she had sold, they hand over keys to the new owner. Anyways, I'll explain more about what I found and what the properties I'm researching. First ever IWIN US Property Tour. All virtual, of course, on Saturday morning, February 10th. We'll be covering properties from Texas and Tennessee in search for both cash flow and appreciation. If you've been following the news in Canada like I do, for example, Hamilton just passed a new bylaw where the landlord needs to do a major renovation, say there's a flood, and the tenants have to vacate in order for the landlord to do reparations to make the property safe, to stop the mold growth. If that landlord has to find another apartment, similar rents for the tenant. I wish all the parties involved good luck. And the market, let's just use Hamilton, continue with the Hamilton example, vacancies under 1%. And of course, rent control, like C rents are under rented. I do not see how it's feasible for anyone to be responsible for someone to locate someone cheap rental property. It just doesn't exist. I'm selling my rentals and I'm getting the you-know-what out. A past client of mine messaged me this weekend asking why the change from reconstruction condos for obvious reasons to invest in duplexes. So she asked why the change had to do with the US. And I'll explain the story. Remember when Elon Musk was on the Joe Rogan podcast, Smoking Weed? The first time he did it. Now, I'm not a regular listener to Joe's podcast, but I do tune in when he has the occasional big guest. If you know Joe, he loves to talk about conspiracy theories and particularly aliens. And then Elon shut him down. So Joe asked Elon if there's aliens, if aliens have ever visited Earth or something like that. And Elon would be the person you want to ask because he'd probably know. So Elon goes to explain that there's never been evidence of advanced technology found on Earth, and he believes so he believes there is no evidence of aliens ever visiting Earth. But he will believe there's aliens once there's irrefutable evidence that demonstrates there are aliens. Until then, he will go with the assumption there are no aliens. So that was years ago, yet Joe still rambles on about aliens. But for me, honestly, the case is closed. I'm not going to worry about aliens until there's new evidence. So no different for me with the U.S. real estate investments. I think everyone's known for a long time that investing in the U.S. was better than generally all of Canada. But again, all the same problems, all the old problems were there. Building a team is hard. There's many people out there that we all know who got their butts handed to them investing in the U.S. And add to that, real estate investing makes little sense if you don't have access to cheap mortgages. Because without cheap mortgages, you would just why not just invest in the stock market? It's a lot less work. But in Canada, we can get cheap mortgages. When I met my new strategic partner, I can share the asset manager. And when Scott Dillingham of Glen City Mortgages opened up shop in the USA, now he can get me infinite mortgages in the US. Only now do I have a team to make direct real estate investments 10 times easier than it is in Canada. 10 times easier. So, and at the same time, Ontario and BC have been most unfavorable to landlords. Add to that my theory that the Canadian dollar will decline in value compared to the US dollar over the long term, which makes sense due to our growing debt, lack of investment, lack of productivity. It's kind of sad. So what is the sophisticated investor to do? Based on my research, this just makes sense. And I will welcome anyone to challenge my theory, and I'm happy to do so on my show. Just again, fair warning. I honestly feel I haven't said enough. Because again, anyone who knows me knows that I was not a fan of Epic Alliance's business model. I was not a fan of Fortress Real Estate Developments. I saw it in the wrong group and in the business model operated by Clydesdale Capital, and that poor young lady who just deleted her website and Instagram, rumored to have gone bankrupt and lost all of her investors' money. And her too, she was never on my show, just like all the others. Anyways, less stress, more returns, and cash flow. That is how one makes real estate investing great again. On to this week's show. We have a podcast host in a Canadian investing in Sunbelt. He's a nice guy, Sharon, a seasoned real estate investor, and he's here to share how his own journey of how he ran into a wall investing in Ontario and then pivoted to investing in the US back in 2017. Glen shares insights from his experience, including strategies for finding and managing properties, navigating different market conditions, and the importance of building a reliable team, all from the comfort of his home near Waterloo, Ontario. Now, I emphasize the value of solving complex property issues because Glen is dealing with complicated problems in small towns all over a very big country. This strategy is not faint with the heart. Me personally, I'm going for boring. Glen, however, is a full-time investor with sufficient capital, and he must like the excitement. It's totally cool. We are totally on two different ends of the risk tolerance spectrum, which is totally multiple ways to make money in real estate. My job here is only to show you different options so you can choose what's appropriate for you. So without further ado, I give you Glen Sutherland. Actually, before I introduce Glen, before I give you Glen, his website is www.glensutherland.com, or you can find him on YouTube. Again, the name of the show is Canadian Investing in the USA. All right, please enjoy the show. Hi, Glen. What's keeping you busy these days?
Oh, everything, real estate. Well, real estate businesses, right? Well, like, I don't know how I don't know what we're planning on talking about exactly, but yeah, real estate business. I used to do a lot of real estate even in Canada, and transformed to the US, and then I transformed it into a business. So for, people like, how long you been in the US? And honestly, I'm not sure. It's like 7 years, I think, maybe 8 years. But I live outside of Waterloo, Ontario, so I don't actually live in the US, but I've been investing there for that time. But honestly, it's only been like 3 years where it was actually a business. So I think that's a big thing that people don't realize the difference. I'm not sure if you wanted to go down this path at all, but yeah, it was before I used to buy rental properties. And then I'd sort of manage them, and they were kind of started off with some turnkey ones, which means like you basically, had tenants or rent ready, and you just basically collected the paychecks and managed a property manager, right? But then as you start growing, you start building in contractors and wholesalers and direct mail and all the different other parts that come with building a business. If you aren't set up like a business and you're just doing investing, you find that you start dropping balls. You'll be like, I forgot about that property, because honestly, you bought so many properties. Like at one point, we were buying one a week, right? Every single week, we were buying a property.
So when you were buying one a week, was that local or was that stateside?
That was stateside, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So you easily can like go, I forgot to set up insurance, or that's an extreme one. But like, and then you realize I have to start building systems. I have to build checklists and everything else, right? And a lot of people, you can handle 5, maybe 10 properties yourself in your mind. But whenever you want to actually turn this into a business and, have a lot of stuff running, and you're dealing, honestly, like we were talking before the show, dealing with a lot of people, right? Dealing with a lot of contractors, property managers, people doing what they're supposed to be doing, people doing not what they're supposed to be doing, people taking longer than they're supposed to do. If you don't have some sort of system set up to start with, you're going to be overwhelmed, right? And as you start to do this, like I said, you get like 5, maybe 10, and then your mind is starting to, you're like, oh, this one, it turns into be too much. It's honestly too much. And a lot of people are like, Glenn, how do you do all those? And that's a lot of it is just building checklists and doing all this stuff. So how's business? Business is good. I think we're recording this. I don't know when this is going to air. We're recording this in November 2023. And so I think we have 5 sales this month and 2 purchases. So we're pretty busy. We just offered on a 80 unit as well. And then the other ones are all single family homes.
Fantastic. That was a bit of everything. All right. So how many houses do you think you've owned so far in the States?
200 maybe? 200. I'm not sure. I'd have to go through my thing. Maybe.
What was the mix roughly?
For like
single family, duplex? How many were like duplex, fourplex, beyond 10 unit? Just roughly. Roughly,
probably more than half would be single families, right? Maybe 60% single families, and then I don't know. I've had 6 fourplexes. And I don't know, a bunch of duplexes to fill it in. I don't know. I have to, for actual numbers, I got to get on my computer and pull it up. Look what I send to the mortgage brokers.
We're not gonna hold you. We're not gonna take you to court over this. That's what the listeners get an understanding of like the mix. And then, how many markets are you in?
I think I usually say 7. So we do in Ohio, we do Dayton, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio. We used to do Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm still open to it, but we don't have any there anymore. I sold them all off 2 years ago. Kansas City, Missouri, Huntsville, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, Jacksonville, Florida, and Brevard County, Florida, which is like Cocoa Beach and Cape Canaveral, that area down there. So Titusville, Melbourne Beach, over on the ocean side. Yeah.
And then how long do you hold these properties?
Well, that depends, right? Because whenever we buy anything, we try to have multiple exits on it. So we usually want it to work as a BRRRR. So a BRRRR in the US has to exit. Usually our cash out refis are at 65% loan to value, not the lovely 80% that you typically get in Ontario. So there's always advantages and disadvantages of both countries, but you just have to run your numbers and find those numbers, right? But if we're doing a BRRRR, what was the question? How long do I hold them?
Yeah, what's your typical hold? Because I want the listener to understand, are you flipping, are you accumulating?
Yeah, so typically what I say is it's like 6 months or so for a BRRRR, right? So what we ideally like to do is like a 3-month reno, a 3-month, seasoning, and then 6 months from purchase to refinance. That's if things go perfect. Honestly, a lot of times, a month or two or whatever can slip because of contractors, permits, other things, right? So that's how the BRRRRs sort of go. The flips, same sort of thing. Ideally, we like to be in and out in 6 months, especially now. I used to do larger projects. That project that we're just finishing up is going to hit the market next week in Jacksonville. It's over a year, right? And we used to buy buildings from the county or the city or from banks or ones that are even on the block to be torn down.
Were these tax sales and power sales?
They're not tax sales, but they're like from programs like that have taken back. Some people haven't paid their taxes. Not taxes. Some people haven't paid their
utilities.
Anyway, they've come back. Yeah, they've come back to the sometimes whatever reason the different places own them, or foreclosures or short sales. But usually we weren't doing the tax deeds. We're looking at doing the tax deeds in Birmingham right now, but I've never done them. Right. So where was I going with that? We'd buy properties that were on the block to be torn down. Like some of them, they were in such rough shape that after a while, the city would just take them back and then sell them for almost nothing.
Oh, so like condemned houses?
Yeah, condemned houses.
Right. You want to make not for the faint of heart.
No, they're not for the faint of heart. But those ones make the most money. If you can buy something with like a 400,000 ARV for like 20 grand, there's a lot of room to make money. But you're going to be, and in this market, you're exposed for so long. Like these projects take a long time. They take a long time to get permits, because a lot of it's like stacked. Like you're going to have to go do your electrical, get all your electrical signed off, then work on the water, then get all the water signed off, work on the HVAC. And it's just like step by step by step. And it's slow. It's not like building a new house. You can get a whole package with all the permits and build a house really fast. When you're doing those full ones, it's like sometimes you even need to get clear violations. So especially Florida, you have to clear all the violations. You have to pull a permit for each violation, and that could be like cracked windows, no railings on steps, outside, interior, no water to the house, no hot water to the house, and so you have to pull permits and clear all of these items. And so all those things you're going to do anyway, but you're going to do them in the wrong order. Because you have to clear the violations before you can get your full building permits.
So you can just get one building permit to say I'm going to fix the whole darn thing.
Yeah, but it makes a lot of money, but it's timelines. And when the market was going up like 2 years ago or even last year, that was fine, right? It just was worth more, right? By the time you sold it.
Right.
In this market, I don't want to be exposed for that long a time. So it's one of the reasons we're not buying as much in 2023 is because we needed projects that are quick. And if you want projects that are quick, you're looking at lipstick projects that usually have, the electrical and the plumbing have all been updated in the last like 20 years. So if you're buying those, there's lots of competition for those, and there's not as easy to get a good deal on those. So it's harder to keep the volume up, right? So we slowed down a lot. And a lot of people think, oh, it's because he's scared of the market. Yeah. That's true. It is true. I'm not stupid. I'm going to play it safe, but I'm going to buy at a big enough discount that it's going to make sense. We just can't find enough big discounts if they're close, if they're just outdated, right? That's usually not enough.
Right.
Like my favorite ones are ones with like property line issues through the house, like where they can't even sell it, stuff that it won't qualify for financing. Right. Yeah. It means that HUD, FHA, VA, all that financing in the US, it won't, anything government backed won't lend on it. Right. That's the perfect stuff because that's cash purchases. Right. You can fix all those issues. But once again, it's depending on what the issue is, how long does it take? Right. And I used to be more open to that, and I'm a lot less open to that now. Right. Yeah.
So you're actually on the ground. So are you seeing things turn? Like, for example, like just this morning, inflation rate came in low. So treasury bills are they're coming down. So it looks like we're going to see less expensive mortgages, fixed rate mortgages going forward. And we may have already turned the corner. You mentioned you sold 5 properties just this month already.
Well, they're going to sell. We sold one yesterday. And then the other ones are scheduled to sell throughout the month. So that's a big thing. Some of the programs for lending, because there's all kinds of in the US, programs that help people get into homes. A lot of them didn't exist because they were too scared during the last year. And I think what's called home plan, or I'm just going to butcher this. Anyway, one of them in Florida, it just came back. And so like I have a property up for sale right now, and they're like, this is going to help the property move, right? Because people are going to qualify for it. But yeah, with these really expensive rates, it's tough. Think about this. If you're going to qualify and you're going to be paying, Americans typically put they like those HUD mortgages with 3% down. So they're going to leverage at 97%. 97% on like a Florida $500,000 house at 7%. This is an expensive payment every single month. So I'd love to see it go down. Honestly, I don't see it. I don't see it going down much at all. I see this thing flattening out. But I am not an economist. I am not going to say anything. But even still, when we're buying the multifamily, we're running our numbers that the cap rate is going to go up. We're running our numbers that the interest rates are going to go up too, right? So we're putting 1.5% more on it over the next, because usually we're doing a 3-year project. So we want to make sure that we're not going to be one of those, syndicators for the larger stuff that's going to get us in trouble when we go to refinance. I want to be. I've never lost anyone's money yet, and I don't want to start. So, which means it's really hard to buy because the sellers still have the mentality of last year's numbers. So it's hard to especially the apartment stuff. I'm kind of flipping back and forth. So it's really going to confuse everybody. But maybe I should stick to the single family. I don't know. But the last Friday, so we're talking mid-November. The Fed kept their rate the same. But the U.S. Government-backed mortgages dropped by a quarter point, right? Because they can do like a prime minus sort of thing. So they did drop it to try and make it more affordable. So that could be something. The Fed isn't dropping, but the banks want to sell or want to get mortgages. They're in the business of loaning money, and they need people to take the loans. And if people can't afford the loans, they're not going to take the loans, and the banks don't make money, right? Not that the banking system's completely different in the U.S. Most of these mortgages are mortgage-backed securities, meaning that they don't actually hold them on their books. Like if you think about like a traditional Royal Bank or CIBC or TD or whatever in BMO in Canada, right? They're going to keep those mortgages on their books. Whereas in the US, they're going to securitize the loans and sell them in the secondary market. So insurance companies will pick them up. Your grandma could go buy the mortgage on a property, right? Yeah. So it's a different sort of game. A lot of times they play in the US than Canada, just the way everything's done.
On the bigger scale, though, folks need to appreciate that because the Americans, I don't know if it's because, but it helps the Americans because they had their housing crisis, they had their crash of the financial markets and the housing markets. The Americans are, I think, 30%. They have 30% less household debt than we do per capita than we Canadians. Yeah. So when I'm studying all this, I'm not an economist, but they have 30% less debt than us. So if there's a correction, usually whoever has more debt eats it worse. Right? Yeah, you have more debt, you're in a tougher position, and the drop will be worse. So yeah. While it is interesting how the Americans do operate, it seems that they've learned some lessons. But yeah, and also they have some of their banks are just smaller, and generally it's those small banks that went under. Right. Yeah. That's
the other thing. If you're going to put money in banks, you need to look at the FDICs on the bank, which is like CDICs in Canada. So it's what your bank account is insured up to, right? So a Bank of America bank account, I believe, has a $200,000 your account's insured up to. Most banks are $100,000. Some of the small ones are $50,000. So if you go above that number and then the bank goes under, you lose the rest of the money. You only get the insurance paid. Yeah. So you should know that where your money is.
Yeah, there's a lot of diligence to be done, which is why we have you on the show. So let's just start there. What banks are you with?
In the U.S. or what I just recently started doing was we moved some accounts to Mercury, which is just like an online bank. It's like the equivalent of like PC Financial or Simply or the Canadian sort of online banks. Right. So honestly, it came out of simplicity. It was easy. We could do wires remotely, and so it just met the criteria. My bank account that I was using before, I was originally using Progress Bank the main branch is Huntsville, Alabama, because that's where I started investing was Huntsville, Alabama. That's why I set that account up. But they recently started not liking foreign accounts. If you didn't set it up with a social security number, if you're instead setting it up with an ITIN number, an international tax ID number, which is what a Canadian would use to file taxes with the IRS, they became less favorable about it. So then they started first, their cutback was they'd allow it only if I was part of it because I was already an existing customer, like if I opened a new corporation, but my ITIN was tied to it. And now I think I've heard some other people that are just not even giving accounts right now. What happened with Bank of America, they pulled the same thing. They gave everyone accounts and then they closed a whole bunch of the accounts. They weren't really interested in the foreign ones. So they'll give you a 30-day notice piece of paper and then you can switch. Royal Bank did that about 3 years ago. Royal Bank in Florida, they went and closed a whole bunch of Canadian accounts, which is mind-blowing because it's, basically a brother sister to Royal Bank in Canada. It's RBC Bank in the US. And I was at a meetup down in Florida with all Canadians. Every person was a Canadian there, and they were like, half the room had Royal Bank accounts. They're all getting closed at the time. They're just like, I don't know what's going on. It happens. The thing is, the Americans, when stuff happens, something happens. That was COVID, right? Something happens, they panic. And they make a drastic change, like they'll stop lending or they'll close bank accounts to just try and make it safer for themselves. And they don't think about sometimes what the bigger picture is, right? They just react, right? They make a split decision and they don't realize if all the banks stop doing this, then where does the money go? It has to flow somewhere, right? It has to be held somewhere. And every time this happens, there's always... usually someone comes in and comes up with a solution. And honestly, that's why hard money is such a big thing in the US, is during the 2007 crisis, the banks all stopped lending and the hard money was the only thing that was available. And it just exploded. And now there's so many hard money lenders, portfolio lenders in the US that, that came from this reaction of the banks holding, right?
Sorry, just step back. You said Mercury Bank, was that it?
Yep.
Mercury Banking. I Googled it. Mercury Banking for Startups. So mercury.com, that sound right?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
Cool.
It's pretty easy. You just have to, I think they need a piece of paper that has something that, a utility or something in your name. Besides that, just, you can even use your Canadian driver's license, your Canadian stuff, and sets it all up. So it's pretty easy. But the other banks used to do that same thing too. Certain banks like TD, they used to require you to go in to set up a corporate account, but you could set up your personal accounts online, right? Royal Bank, you could do it all online before. Progress Bank, which is now UCBI, down in Alabama, used to be able to do it all online. Well, they still can do it all online, just aren't really friendly to Canadians right now. Things change though. That thing is that even with leverage rates, everything with Canadians, sometimes, it's just all based on risk, right? And they'll lower their risk and they'll allow more stuff. Like 2 years ago, we were getting refinances at 75% loan to value. Right now it's 65 because the risk's high, right? To be holding mortgages.
You mentioned ITIN earlier, individual taxpayer identification number. Can you mention what that's for? Why do you need it?
Yeah, so you're going to need that to set up a bank account is usually where I'm going to, where it's going to come as a number. You fill it in the exact same as your social security number or social insurance number, still 9 digits, fills in the exact same boxes. If it says social security number, you put that number in instead, and you need that to file with the IRS. So,
so it's a social insurance number for Canadians, for non-Americans, basically.
Exactly, right. And then, you're going to need that to file your taxes, especially if you're using like a limited partnership in the United States. It's going to be mandatory. If you do
Which
C Corp,
seems to be the best practice.
There's a bunch of different ways to set it up, but you can use C Corps as Canadians too. And if you do a C Corp, then you get dividends in that sort of way. And technically, you don't need it off the start if you're doing like a C Corp until you do a dividend, because as soon as you do a dividend, now you're introducing personal income, and now you have to file, right? So off the start, some way people, if they, usually that's not the hang up, but it does take like a couple months to get your ITIN number. So some people I just want to close and do stuff, and they'll pick a C Corp. I don't know. People do use the LLCs in the United States, but and I have used them as a Canadian. It is complicated to use them correctly. There's a bunch of extra rules being Canadians to use them. And if you just treat it like a regular bank account and you're leaving funds in there every month, you will actually end up leading to double tax. So you can use them, but you better know what you're doing. If you're doing it, and that's why I honestly say just stay away from them, because you're going to end up making a mistake and Canada Revenue is going to tax you, and IRS will tax you. But if you set up an LP or a C corp, you're not going to. There's trade agreements between both countries, and you'll be in a lot better shape.
Just an observation. I find the folks who are trying to buy like numerous apartment buildings, they tend to seem to lean towards LLC versus small mom and pop who's going to own a handful of properties. Seems to be the more simpler structures like an LP or C corp.
Well, they want a lot of people, even the Americans, why they like the LLCs, it's right in the name, limited liability, right? So they want to take the liability away, right? So that they're not no one's personally liable for this, right? And so that's why they do it, right? But if you do it as a Canadian, like 100-foot level, is
you could be double tax.
You could get double taxed. Well, the main thing is
it's a nightmare.
No money, zero balance in your bank account at December 31st. Because when it rolls the tax year, whatever's left there could be double taxed. So you want to be pulling it back to Canada, pulling it into your other corps. Right. So some people still will set up like LPs and have LLCs underneath to hold the properties. You can do that, but then basically those LLC accounts are like holding companies. It should be flowing up to the parent company. It shouldn't be held in those accounts. So it's just extra work, right? You just set that up as an LP or a C corp, and you don't have to do that extra work. You can just leave the money in those accounts because it can stay there.
So let's go back to buying. Let's talk about buying real estate.
Yeah.
What is it you're looking for? Like, what are the criteria, both in terms of the market, like as in location, and what are you looking for in a property?
So honestly, everybody should be doing this when they're trying to buy anything. You need to make sure that there's enough money in there for you and somebody else, even if you're buying it for yourself. People get lazy when they have money and they just buy stuff, and there's not enough profit for two people, right? Budget it in for two people. Even if you're like budget like you're going to do a joint venture, even if you're not going to do a joint venture, is the thing that it's really a mindset change when you look at that. Because if you have to split some of these returns, you're like, oh no, I'm making like 13-14% on this turnkey property. This is perfect, right? And then people look at it and you realize if you had to split that with somebody else, you're like, well, that's not going to really, I don't think other people would sign up for this, right? I think
you and I can't go sign up for a REIT together and split to split to 8 to 12%. So we're each getting like 4 to 6. So just get a GIC at that point.
Exactly. You might as well, because you can probably get those rates right now, right? So or at least close and have the security and not have the risk of real estate or, someone stealing the air conditioner or a furnace breaking, all that stuff. You might as well take a safe investment, right? But anyway, it depends where I'm investing. What I'm.
Oh, sorry. First off, so you want returns for two? What kind of return? What are your target returns then?
Well, if say I'm doing a BRRRR, right? And what I'm looking for is for this property to cash flow, like I'd say at least $300. And I'm talking about like on a cheapo house, right? And these houses sometimes I can buy. Maybe I'll step back. Like for this kind of house, I'd look for something like say 50,000 purchase, a 50,000 reno, and an ARV of like 155, 160, right? Because of those numbers, as long as we can do a cash out refinance at 65% loan to value, which means we'll do a perfect BRRRR, we'll extract all the cash, and I want it after the refinance so we can have like $300 at least to split. So at that point, it's an easy sell to an investor because the risk to them is low. You're going to put your money in, you're going to get your money back in about 6 months, depending on contractors and other things, right? But put your money in, you get your money back, and then you still have a cash flow and there's no money in the deal, right? So when I'm doing BRRRRs, that's what I'm kind of looking for. With flips, it has to hit the certain chunk of money. And it's not down to a certain percentage, because a certain percentage, it's sometimes when you talk about cheaper houses, it's not exciting enough for people to be enticed to invest with you, right? So even if you're getting a 20% return on a $100,000 house, and it might not be enough, right? Because they're like, that's not enough money. It's not going to change my life, right? So it's going to depend on where you're buying. Like if you're in Florida, like an $80,000 on a flip would be just fine, right? If you're doing a flip in, say, Ohio, I'd want to make $40,000 typically on a flip after paying realtors, utilities, corporate setup, all that stuff. And the reason is that way that and I'm also going to be being very conservative on the ARVs, especially now. But $20,000 is exciting when you don't put too much money in, right? And you get it turned in a certain short period of time. So a lot of it all comes back to what is marketable, like what is actually exciting to other people, right? Because if you a lot of times off the start, even myself, when I went down to the US, I used my own money. I used my home equity line of credit from Canada, took them equity from my house, went and bought a bunch of houses. But you get lazy when you use your own money. Honestly, you buy turnkey properties. Your money gets stuck in those properties unless they appreciate. There's no really other exits. You haven't forced any value. If you really want to have a lineup of people to invest in your projects, have their money turned at a pretty good, quickly, give them their money back at a pretty good rate, and at a pretty good timeline, right? So that is kind of it. For the multifamily, we're typically underwriting for an 8% pref, which means they get 8% cash flow every month, and usually a 16 to 18 IRR, meaning that they will get across the length of a period. Like, so if we did a 3-year and then we do a refinance, or 3-year and then a sale, that overall they would get 18% per year as the return on that. And that's super passive, right? And that's a syndication style.
Right. And the IRR, the 16 to 18 IRR is what they earn.
Yeah. And that's including the exit and the cash flow, right?
Should it ever not include those things?
I am just being, some people they think that, I'm going to get the 8%, because they always, the paperwork will come out and it'll be 8% pref and, 18% IRR, and they'll think they get 18% and they get 18 on the exit, right? That's why.
Yeah. And what fairy tale is this? If someone promised you that, you need to really check.
Well, I get those questions. That's why I say.
Which is fine. Is a perfectly fine clarifying question, but it's more like, just to confirm here. It's more like, I'm getting this right, because that person likely has not invested in real estate before.
No, and that's honestly some of the people who are interested in that are people who they're interested in real estate, but they're terrified to do real estate, right? And they're the perfect people, to invest in that, right? They can still get their toes wet, they can experience it, and they can be as involved or uninvolved as they want to be. And if it's a syndication model and it's registered with the SEC. Yeah. If you're doing a joint venture, you're going to have to have some kind of active role in the project. In the United States, it's illegal to have a lot of times in Ontario, you always hear people go into the meetups and they're preaching joint ventures and they say active partner and passive partner. That model isn't valid in the United States. You have to have active roles of some kind, because otherwise it should be registered as a security.
Yeah, that's where, we've seen lots of people get in trouble. Seen lots of people get in trouble over that. The epic filler in Saskatoon that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about it right now. I'm more interested in your systems, because I want the listener to understand how do you make this happen, right? So let's start with, for example, how do you find the deal, right? How does it come? Do flyers come to your door, or do so how does the deal how does it arrive in front of your nose so you start looking at it?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes from connections that you make over time, right? So what you need to have is your inbox constantly having deals coming into it. And that's one of the things that I've even had people, I've had students in my class and they'll go, I just went and I can't find any deals. There's no deals that exist in the market I picked. And I'll be like, what market did you pick? And it's a market that I'm in. And they're like, I'm like, you can't find any deals in there? I'm like, I just closed last year, for this month in that market. How you can't find any that hit these criteria? And a lot of it is deal flow. You need to have, it's a numbers game. If you're buying every property that comes in, you're paying too much, right? Most people aren't going to be willing to take a discount, but people do take discounts because they need the money now. Some people will take a subject to on their property because they need a certain amount that they may not need that money now, right? Sometimes.
What's the subject to?
So a subject to is
a condition. Or is that?
You take over an American's mortgage, right? So they've registered for the mortgage. In the US, you can split the deed and the loan. right? So you could sell the property, which would mean the deed would move, but the loan would stay with the seller. So they've already qualified for this mortgage, and the mortgage can stay with them. It's going to show up on their credit report, but you could take over that one. And those are amazing. That's the cheapest mortgages you can get as a Canadian. Think about if you could get a mortgage that was set up like 2 years ago when interest rates were low, with an American qualifying it, not you, because as a Canadian, there's more risk, so our rates are higher than Americans.
And we have no credit, so they don't even know what we are.
But you can take those. You can split them, and then you can split the deed and the loan, and then you can.
Interesting.
The thing is, a lot of it's a trust issue. Is they have to trust you, right? So you're gonna have to build some rapport because they have to trust that you've done this.
You own the property, but they're paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. And so they have to know that you're actually going to do these payments, and whether you're doing this or because you could sell stuff subject to as well. You got to protect your own interests, right? You got to be aware of what's going on, right? They need to be aware of what's going on. Like a lot of times we'll set up a servicing company in the US, which is totally different. Like typically if you had a bank, a loan from RBC Bank in Canada, or Royal Bank in Canada, you would pay Royal Bank the payments. In the US, you pay a servicing company that would pay RBC Bank, right? And you go, why? Well, RBC Bank, they could securitize that loan and sell that loan on the secondary market. And you just keep paying the servicing company, and they pay whoever. The servicing company will collect all the escrows with the insurance, the property taxes, the principal, the interest, disperse stuff wherever it needs to go, homeowners associations, whatever, and they just follow instructions, just like a title company or a lawyer would do in Canada on a closing, but it's on a monthly basis. But then if you set that up and you're the seller of the property, you're going to get your money every month, or you're going to get a notification that they didn't pay. The taxes haven't been paid. Certain things haven't been done, because you need to know that. And if you want to be passive, you don't want to have to be doing this. You just want someone else to do it and then give you a notification if something's not going right. Mm-hmm. But you need to be in the know, right? So that's a little bit different how they set it up.
Yeah, because I don't think that anything like that exists here. That's not even an agreement for sale. It's not. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there is. I was talking to some other people, and they had another name for it, where they were kind of doing the same sort of thing. But you could possibly do that as a purchase lease option in Canada, but you wouldn't be able to move the deed. You'd have to keep the deed with previous.
Yeah, that stays. Yeah,
the seller.
That triggers land transfer tax. Like that's.
Yeah. But honestly, though, a lot of people they want the deed so bad, especially Canadians. We want to own the property, but you don't need to own these properties. You just need to control the properties, right? Yeah. So you could, in the U.S., you could register a contract for deed, right? Which means they don't have the right to sell without you giving a first right of refusal. And if you don't pay, it's a foreclosure instead of an eviction in those situations. So you protect your interest. But think about it. Same thing. Whenever a sale happens, the taxes change, right? Mm-hmm. Guess what? If you took control of the property as a lease option, you can keep your taxes down. You can keep possibly your insurance down. There's lots of advantages to not owning the house, right? But everyone,
you need a really motivated seller who trusts you.
Yeah, no, and sometimes it's those people who are usually open to that is usually investors, right? They're like, I don't care.
Because they have no other options.
And that's like some of those things. If you see houses that don't meet the requirements for government-backed funding, right? There's something wrong with the deed. There's something wrong with the yard, the property line. There's a million different reasons that might not qualify. The condition of the home. Then there's, that's the opportunity to come in with the seller financing, the lease options, this subject to, yeah.
All right. So we're not. Okay, so from past connections, deals coming into your inbox.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So past connections. So like, who are those? Like, could be wholesalers, right? There's tons of wholesalers. There's like, Canada is 1/10 of the size of the US, and wholesaling is way more common in the US than Canada. So there's literally like 100 times as many wholesalers in the US as there is in Canada. There's so many wholesalers. So wholesalers, some of the best deals I've ever bought are from property management, realtors that can't sell stuff, expired listings. If you keep on their list and you're willing to buy them, they have houses that they'll sit on the market for a year because they're in real rough shape or whatever. Sometimes whatever the situation is, like a scary looking crack in the foundation, whatever. Some of those you can buy them. You can, with a lot of them, I just get a professional to go check them out, see what I'm in for beforehand. And if it makes sense, we do it. We just bought a property in Florida where half of the foundation was cracked off. like, so people are probably listening to this and can't see that, but like a little crack off, and they have sinkholes all over Florida, and it dropped one corner to the other like a foot, and it just snapped the concrete. And so
The concrete pad. And sorry,
pad,
how thick is the concrete pad? What?
I don't know.
It's
I'd be
equivalent.
guessing. Yeah, probably
it's no joke. It's the foundation of the house.
Oh yeah. But with that,
wait. So the foundation's cracked, and doesn't the house bend with it?
yeah. There's a little bit of flexibility. Yeah, that's where you get someone with a structural background to check that out. You get a permit guy to go in to check that out.
Yeah.
You get the foundation guy to quote out fixing that. And what they do is we pull permits on it. They jack it up. They fill it with this foam stuff underneath. They pin the two parts together. You rip all the floors out, redo the floors, and you make sure you do this all with permits, because otherwise you'll never sell that house again.
Yeah, because you have to. Yeah, you're doing it virtually too, so you need third-party inspections.
You're going to do some extra inspections before you even start. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, so you're taking on other people's problems, other people's very severe problems.
That's problem solving is the number one game of this real estate thing. You want to make the most money, solve a lot of problems, right?
And the problems that most people don't want to touch.
Nobody want to touch. We had some properties in Toledo, a small portfolio, and the seller and the buyer, they got in this whole fight, and my property manager was involved, and she's like, Glenn, can you come in and help this? They're all planning to sue everybody. Everybody's planning to sue everyone. And I got on the phone, I talked to the seller, I talked to the buyer. It was about prices and everything else, and I can't even remember the whole story, but there was they're basically everyone was going to sue each other. And I basically came in and I said, hey, they're walking away on the deal, the current buyer. If I came in at this price, could I just take the whole thing, solve the whole problem? And they're like, that's less than the current contract. And I go, yeah, but we could solve this problem right now. Right? Do you want to go to court? Do you want to be stuck there for 6 months? Do you want to be fighting? Do you want to sleep tonight? How is it going to affect your wife and relationship? How is this all going to go for you? And they ended up going, you know what? We'll just take your thing. We're not going to sue anyone. Everyone signed off. They won't sue anybody. And I came in and took the portfolio at a cheaper price than even the first investor had it under, right? Solving problems, just finding, we bought houses with property lines going right through them. Nobody can buy them. But you just call up an attorney who specializes that. How much is it going to cost me to move that property line, right? And they're like, you need to get the neighbor to sign off on it. Go talk to the neighbor, see how much they want for the land. Then go put property under contract, sign the paperwork with them, move the line, get the survey done. The attorney will draft it all up and file it with the county, and you're done, right? Okay. A lot of this stuff is solvable, but no one wants to solve it, and you don't qualify for a lot of lending, so people can't solve it because most people need lending.
So we talked about how deals get in front of you so now, like that neighbor, for example, with the property lines going through the house. So you get on a plane now, you go fly down and go talk to the neighbor. So
I don't do any of that because I want to make this a business. So I'm going to have people on my team, right? So every market I'm working on, I'm going to have team members down there, and like that could be anyone that could go over there. You could hire like a public notary to go over there. You could get what I did in my case was I hired my property manager and I said, hey, I'll give you $100, go over them. This is how I want you to negotiate it. And it's also a property manager I've done a lot of projects with, so they're comfortable and understood what I was doing. And they negotiated the deal for me. Like they said, the woman who was there said, we want $4,000 for the land. And she came back to me. No, they wanted $8,000. I was at $4,000, something like that anyway. And they called me while I was on site while they were talking to each other. And I was just like, okay, you can do 6. We can get this all scheduled and sent, and then basically sign some paperwork and took it to the attorney, right? So sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not.
I'm confused. Like the neighbor owned the land, that part of the land the house is already on. I've never seen it that bad.
Yeah, well, even in so there's a downtown Kitchener, for instance, in Ontario. There's a whole road that all the lots are on an angle, or is it the houses are on an angle? And the corner of all these houses on a whole road right downtown Kitchener is screwed up, right? So it happens here too.
That's a corner.
Yeah,
How much of this house is on the wrong side of the lot?
Honestly, what I believe happened is it was an extension on the house, and somebody didn't check something. And,
oh wow! So it was totally done with permits, and a survey was done, right?
It should be anyway.
A bunch of drunk neighbors and family got together to do something, to put an addition.
Yeah. So
Wow. Yeah. So then, yeah. So that's not a bad price to pay for land. 6 grand.
yeah, and it was 20 feet by 150 feet, right? So it was.
That's a lot of land.
Yeah, but it's different. We are also in Alabama, in the country. Like we're not even in a city. We're like they're all farms around us, and you just needed a little bit of a stream of farmland. So it's farmland's not worth the same as like a house, like we're residential land.
Yeah. So I get it. So it's rural. I can't believe the house was that close to the lot line.
Yeah.
Let alone they actually got over it with an addition.
That's the thing. Like some people don't even realize that in that case, the lot line was going right down the edge of the driveway, and they built it, and it stretched, and it only stretched a couple feet over the line, right? Because they were cutting that grass, and they assumed it was their yard, right? And I guess I assume they did permits. Whenever they did that, they must have gotten it. I don't know that part of the story. I just know how to fix it.
Fantastic. So, so you have team members on this ground that you rely on. Because actually, it's a good question. How often are you on site then?
So we went down to Cleveland, and what was that, in August? And we went to a real estate meetup. We shook hands, then we went and toured some properties the next day and met some contractors and built some teams and some relationships. Was it necessary to go there? No, but it's nice to have that personal touch to it. With Dayton, we were down in Dayton and Toledo, I think in July. And we went down, and I just went for dinner. We went and I took some of my students with me, and we went and toured some of my existing projects that are on the go. Didn't need to. Most of the time when I'm going there, it's to shake hands, and like to say, I'm going down to shake hands and kiss some babies, just make face, and sometimes I bring gifts, so I'd like to bring down some Canadian maple syrup, and they love it, right? It's just like it doesn't cost much. It's like a personal touch to the whole thing, and they remember you from it, right?
Maple syrup, got it. Because I like those.
A lot of times I don't go.
Well, I was going to ask you, but
I've never been to Jacksonville in my life.
Really? Heard it's nice.
Yeah, it probably is. I was in Florida. Last time I was there was Tampa. The time before that was Cape Coral and Fort Myers area. I've been down there to Miami, all over. Usually it's vacations, right? I haven't vacationed in Jacksonville before. I haven't vacationed in Cocoa Beach or Melbourne or Cape Canaveral either. I haven't seen any of that area before with my own eyes. You don't need to. You just need to rely on people.
How many properties do you think you've seen of your portfolio?
If you would have asked me that like 2 years ago, it would have been really low. As of recently, I started traveling because it's a business expense and it's kind of fun.
It's fun, yeah.
But honestly,
this business trip where you're having fun. Like what? Yeah. What's I
usually take some other people with me, right? And some students or business partners or JVs or whoever, and we go see some stuff. And anyway, but I've seen probably about half now. But a lot of times I went 2021, I bought a lot of properties. I don't think I saw a single one of them in 2020. All during COVID, I didn't see any of them. We were still buying all the way through. We didn't see any of them. So it's not necessary, but it does help. It does help with, relationships and stuff like that. I'm not going to downplay that you don't need to. It's more important in multifamily, to be honest. We were offering on the properties in San Antonio, Texas, on the 80 unit and the 92 unit and the 105. When we got our team to go there, we didn't physically go there, but our property manager and they went and toured the property and shook hands and met people. And whenever we submitted our offers, they said, you're the second lowest offer, but you're the second offer we're considering. And the reason is because the other people didn't tour the property. They don't know if they're serious offers. Yeah. They don't know if they're just going to, once they put this under contract,
just want to tie it up and waste.
And then they'll just come down. Then they'll find more problems, lower their price, and it's not even a good valid offer, right? In the thing. So
those offers are riskier.
Oh yeah, there's so much riskier. So
it's actually years ago, like I think years ago, Hamilton, like just the market wise, sellers would take, or agents would take offers where they had not seen the property yet, and then the policy changed pretty quickly. No sight unseen offers allowed.
Well, even right now, what we're wanting is we're getting offers on these houses. We want to see proof of funds with the offer, right? Because you know, yeah.
Too many time
Otherwise,
kickers out there.
you're gonna change our status
Yeah.
on the MLS for sale to
Yeah.
pending, and then it's gonna go relisted afterwards when it comes back. And I don't want that relisted because everyone goes,
Stigma,
"Why
yeah.
is it relisted?
What's
What
wrong
is
with it?
someone else
Yeah.
didn't want it for some reason? I don't want it to be because of financing."
Yeah, that's the worst reason. Yeah,
Yeah.
because with all these course graduates out there, they are literally tying up properties and then going to trying to find the money to close on it. They don't have, they never had the money to close.
So I guess we want proof of funds. And even I'm finding other people wanting, you know, when I'm putting offers in, they want proof of funds. And honestly, it's good for everybody to have that. And it's kind of an inconvenience for me to show proof of funds sometimes. But you know what it does is it makes you have, you know, I don't know if, I like to call it my oh shit fund. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on air, but I like to have, you need that money, right? I don't have a job, right? I need that money. If you don't have a sale for a while, if you have some repairs or something on some of these projects and the cash flow doesn't come that month, I still need to pay my mortgage and do all these things, live. I need to live. And I need to be not close. I don't want to be tight and stressed out. So I usually keep like at least 100 grand just sitting in a savings account just so that smooth out the bumps. If stuff happens, you know, like for instance, last fall, we didn't buy at all. We stopped, mortgage rates jumped, and we just said, whoa, I didn't have to buy, right? I don't have to buy, so I'm not going to buy until I figure out what the heck's happening. I'm not going to keep buying into a recession because that's what I thought was happening at the time. Turned out it was a little bump, but who knows, right? I don't want to have to be in that position, right? So it's good to have that money, and then you have to have a proof of funds. And so you're going to have to save money and not put all your eggs in your basket. I did that at one point in my early investing career in the US. I was buying all these properties and I put my entire line of credit in the US. Do you know what happens? Like your line of credit payments, if you're doing renovations, there's no money coming in. How do you make the payments on your line of credit in Canada if all your money is in the US? It comes from your like 9-to-5 job. And then that puts pressure on your own living in your house, and it puts pressure on everything, and it's miserable. Like it's way, you need to have, you know, your oh shit money. You can't survive. It's mentally, at least the way I look at it, you have to have that. You need it for funding. You're going to need it for mental wellness.
Good call. Yeah. And now let's talk about property management, because I think that's I think it's a big part of the conversation. I think many people overlook.
Yeah.
What are you looking for in a property manager?
A lot of things. I literally just recorded a new video about this yesterday. 40 minutes just on
fresh, easy.
Just all
40
the
minutes. We don't have 40 minutes.
40 minutes of questions for the property manager, and then why I asked those questions. But a lot of it is I want to have alignment with these property managers. So everyone always goes, I want to have the cheapest rate. You're like, that could be
no. Let's
no. I'm telling you, my students are like, cheapest rate. I'm going to shop around until I find this.
Oh my god,
for like 6%.
That's like going with the low bid contractor.
Yeah.
You're just asking for it.
So some things I don't like is some of them, the way the property management contract is worded is it'll say like 10% of the rent equals this amount. And then in the following line below that, it'll say that amount is your monthly property management fee. If you see that in your contract, you need to clarify on that, because that means you are under the impression that it's 10% of the rent collected. Yeah. But that's how they came up with the number. That's not what's in the writing. If it's done like that, what they're going to do is if your property is vacant, they're still charging you a property management fee.
Oh boy.
You don't want that, right?
No.
A lot of them too, they'll charge an upsell of 10% on top of maintenance calls if it's a third-party contractor, because they're managing it or they're going to go check on it. That sometimes that's not a big deal. We just did windows. We replaced all the windows in a property in Toledo, and that was like $24,000. Paying 10% extra on that sucks. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's so many windows. Like a house full of windows.
It's a large scale project that's pretty monotonous.
Yeah. So but there's sneaky stuff that they slip into the contracts like that, right? You want to see who's on their team. What can they do for you? Do they do properly? You know, everyone can do a property management turn, but you know, what level? Who are the team members on that property management? Like who can they like? So say there's an electrical problem with the house. Are they calling an electrician, or do they have an electrician on their staff? Because if it's a third-party electrician, you might be paying $40, $50 an hour for this person. If it's on staff, your contract, at least most of them say, for on-staff calls, maintenance calls, it's $15 an hour plus repairs. So that's huge. You're paying $15 an hour for the electrician instead of like $40 or $50 for to have the thing. So it's who do they have? What are they doing? And some of the big companies, like the one we're working with in Cleveland, they have plumbers, HVAC, electricians, all on staff.
Right.
So that changes your numbers, right? Whereas a lot of them, they sub it out. Some of them don't charge that extra 10% fee, but I'm just wanting people to know that some of them do, right? Something to ask. Oh, the lease ups. The lease ups are
Sorry,
totally...
before we move on from maintenance, like the Cleveland PM, how many houses do they have under management?
I think it's like 3,000 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I want Canadians to appreciate is how much larger the property managers are in the States. Like they're enormous. Like,
oh yeah.
Like, do you know anyone personally in Canada who have HVAC people on payroll? Right? You'd have to be a construction company.
But the thing is, it's also a lot of them, it depends on states, right? But a lot of the states, the property manager is more regulated than it is in Canada. So most things are looser in Canada and more regulated in Canada. But for property management, it's the opposite. You have to have a broker's license, and you have to have a realtor's license, and you have to have a property management license, right? So they should have this stuff. Otherwise, you might not be able to get the same insurance. Like if you're going to do like a renovation, like a fix and flip loan, you're going to go to the bank and get that kind of financing. They're going to ask for all those licenses because they're going to cover their butt. Mm-hmm. And you should ask for those licenses too, because it covers your butt also. Yeah. And if they don't do what they say they're going to do, you can put a lien on the license, which means they can't pull a permit until they settle this. Guess what? They're going to settle the issue with you, right? If you don't have that information, you can't put a lien on their license. Mm-hmm. So it's important to have all the information. And if you are having trouble and you ask for the information, they're never going to give it to you. They're going to give it to you when you're signing the contracts and setting it all up, right? Mm-hmm. It's easier to get it when things are going well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you brought up a great point. They need to be licensed, and they probably, if they're a business of that scale, they likely have to have licenses in each of the trades as well. Like to have an HVAC business, the business needs to have its own license. Usually, part of the owner, one of the owners or management have to have licenses in those trades as well. Yeah. But like that, I think for most Canadians looking for a PM, that should probably be one of your criteria in qualifying a property manager. Like how many trades do they have on staff? Because that means less cost for you.
Yeah, and what can you even do with them, right? Because like they could do a renovation for you, maybe if it's light, right? Maybe some can, some can't, right? Maybe they only do tenant turnovers for you. Maybe that's as far as they go, right? Mm-hmm. It's just figuring what they can do for you. I was going to talk about lease up fees. Yeah. Some of them, they charge you a month off the start. Some of them charge you a half a month. Some of them have a flat fee. This can change. It can be a lot, right? It could be a lot of difference in price, right? Because, your first month's gone. So typically they'll charge rent a full amount. So if your rent's like $2,000 a month, they'll charge you $2,000. You'll get $2,000 of rent, but it'll go right to the property manager because their lease up fee. Some of them will charge you the property management fee on top of that. So you're actually in the negative after the first month. In the second month, it's a prorated rate because say they moved in on the 15th of the month before. So you get prorated in the second month. It might not be till the third month you actually get rent, because of all these things. And a lot of people, that's a shocker, right? Because if you're not used to using property management at all.
Or you may make some concessions as well, because the rental market is not as strong in the States generally as it is
it doesn't have the same demand. It's usually not zero vacancy like Ontario.
Like Ontario. Like our dysfunctional housing crisis creates some good things for us.
Exactly. But you need that. You have to have that in Ontario to if you're going to put your money in for and have to deal with these terrible evictions and terrible rent raise rules, you better have zero vacancy. Yeah.
Because you live near Waterloo, which is a wonderful place to invest, yet you choose not to.
Well, I used to have a place in Waterloo. I used to have a place in Kitchener. I used to have a bunch of places in Cambridge. But I sold them all off. I don't have any of them anymore. I used to have some in Strathroy, or one in Strathroy as well. But I sold them off, I don't know, 5 years ago. I think the last one I sold off during COVID, the Strathroy property, I held that one on for a long time.
So you have zero rental properties in Canada? Just
this house we're sitting in. That's all I have is my principal residence is all I have in Canada.
Yeah. I think I want to get to that point too.
Well, the thing is, it's, you go, I don't know if I wasn't planning on going down this route, but a lot of people that they go, well, my property cash flows really well because I set this mortgage up back when the houses were 300,000, right? Even though they're worth like $1 million or 750, whatever the number is right now. And they're like, the cash flows really well because I set it up a long time ago. But you got to think about the ROE, the return on your equity that's sitting in that property. And sometimes when you do the math, you'll be astonished because you have like $400,000 of equity sitting in that property. And you're like, subtract off the costs to dispose of the asset, right? To sell it. But you're like, if you're only earning 2% or something on that, you're like, on all that equity, you're like, you could put that in a savings account and earn more money, right? Like, you don't have to go invest in the US, but you can go into private lending. There's lots of options to do it. You're like, but if you don't do an ROE calculation, you won't even know where you're at on some of these.
I'd also add to that, I think people need to look at their numbers, what they look like 10 years from now, 5-10 years from now. Yeah. Because of rent control, we can't raise our rents. All our expenses just get higher.
Yep. So, unless you do a cash for keys and switch your tenant.
How do you maintain any cash flow if you're doing cash for keys every 5 years?
Yeah.
Here's 5, 10, 12 grand. Like, how much did you cash flow to afford that? You probably shouldn't be getting rid of them.
Yeah. Whenever I see that, I usually the times it makes sense is if it's a 5+, like commercial finance property, a 5+ units. Because then you can, it'll improve the net operating income, apply it to a nice low cap rate in Ontario, and you'll get your money, more than your money worth. You give them $5,000 or $10,000 to leave, and then you move the value up of the building by 75 grand, and you do the refinances every 5 years to, then have money to pay everyone to leave and start over again. But it can make sense, but
it can make sense. It's just so complicated.
It's so complicated.
Finding a 4, 5, 6plex that makes sense with a reasonable cap rate, because you're probably looking at like 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
And then so you're not making any money.
Well, it was easier to make it make sense when the interest rates are lower, because then you make the difference, right? Between the cap rate and the and your interest rate. But now with the high interest rates, I don't know, everything's getting tougher. And I know same thing happened in the US. When I want to sell houses, it's tougher for people to buy them, right? Because they can't qualify for that much payments every month, right? You want to sell a place in Florida, they're going to sit a little bit longer because no one can afford those payments on it, right? Same thing, you want to refinance, same thing. Everything's a little tougher now, both countries, everywhere.
Glenn, I want to talk more about the properties now. Because you mentioned price points of like you're getting in for like 50, 80,000. So these are like AAA houses, right? Like doctors and lawyers live in these things.
Yeah, no, they're usually like in the city. Like they're for that kind of price, we buy all different kinds, right? I'll still buy a $400,000 house. But it's easiest you want to make your numbers work. It's a lot easier on cheap stuff, right? Your ROIs are going to be really high, right? You're going to deal with a lot.
Yeah, your cash flow, your IRR tend to be higher. Yeah.
You have a lot more tenant turnover typically too in those areas. You're going to have, you better be factoring more vacancy, more repairs, more all that stuff, right? Because it's a toss up because a lot of people skip all that, right? They do. They skip that part of the underwriting. They're like, oh, it's just, this is what the rent is. This is how much it costs, and it just works out.
Zero vacancy. Right? Yeah, no problem. Right, yeah, nothing ever goes wrong with renovations.
Yeah. So different price points. I don't know. Like we what was the question really about what
are these properties like?
So it depends, right? And the thing is, when we're buying these, like the ARVs are like 150, 160, right? Still sounds really cheap to Canadians, but those, it's still really cheap, but those are like not as cheap as there are houses that have ARVs of like 50,000 if you fix them up.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But those are going to be in the rough neighborhoods. What I would prefer to do is find
where you don't want to walk around at night, right?
Yeah. A C neighborhood or a C+ neighborhood. And then you can get something that will, people want to live there with their family, right? Maybe they're in an apartment building, they want to move into a real house or something like that. But there's an upside to move to it, and honestly, that's one of the things I get. This popped in my head, and it's way off topic, but I have a lot of students that do the class, and then they go, "I want to go buy all these houses in Cleveland or wherever, and I want to do duplex conversions and turn all the basements."
Okay, yeah, I want to hear where that's going.
And I'm always like, no, don't do it
Yeah,
because no one's going to rent it. And they go, why would no one rent it? Because I'm like, because you don't have 0% vacancy. And and you go, if
yeah.
they
No
can
one
rent-
chooses to live in the basement unless they have to,
Yeah.
right?
If
Does people
they
forget
have-
that? Like, if you're like an adult living in your parents' basement, like it's not something you brag about.
no, they would rather live in like a house that's, 90s or 80s ish, right? It's not, hasn't been updated, that rents for like, $700, $800 a month, then pay $600 and live in a basement that's properly renovated, right? So
Yeah.
you're just going to have a lot of vacancy, even though it's beautiful. And, if it was in Ontario, it would be leased up in a second. That stuff doesn't fly.
Right. So yeah, people need to understand their markets, right?
Oh yeah. Because in places that will work where there's low vacancy, you want to go into California, which I would never recommend, but it'll have like a more similar market to Ontario, and that might fly there. I would say it would probably could fly in Florida, except there's no basements, right? So it's in most places there's no basement, so it won't really fly. You could maybe, it has to be expensive enough for it to make sense. You want to go into New York or something like New York, probably make that work there. It has to be expensive enough for it to make sense to people to go down there.
No, it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
like retail for a basement is like $160,000 retail Canadian dollars for a basement conversion here. Like that's a really good sized down payment for something in the States, or maybe two
The thing
houses.
is, the prices are way different in the US.
Yeah.
I've done full rehabs of houses for like 60 grand. Like I'm talking full, like new siding, new plumbing, electrical, HVAC, new drywall, the whole thing, right? New roof. The prices are way cheaper. So I don't know. That's the hard part too, is that even when I'm working with people who are contractors or home inspectors in Ontario, and they go down there, they're like, none of this works. And you're like, prices are way different, right? Minimum wage is way different.
Some don't do. How many, like, can you give me some minimum wages in areas you operate?
I think minimum wage in Ohio is now $8.25 or something like that. It used to be $7.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So and you go, well, you're not hiring those people, right? But it trickles through the whole system, right?
Yeah.
But you go, hey, we're going to do a clean out. You can, if the contractor is good, they'll have a bunch of college students that just need something on the weekend, and they'll go and fill dumpsters, right? For $10 an hour, right? Which you'd never find someone to do that in Ontario.
Yeah, you'd
right?
have trouble getting someone for 25 an hour.
Yeah, because it's hard work too, right?
Yeah.
So it just trickles down. It is cheaper to do that. I went to get my ensuite in my house here outside of Waterloo renovated, and I was blown away by the cost. I was like, what? Like, what? Because I think they wanted like 60,000 for the bathroom redo for what I wanted. I was like, no.
Nice one.
I'm like, here's all the materials. I'm like, I picked it out on the low side. Like, this is what I want in there. And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, how does it cost so much to install it?
Yeah. And like, I want listeners to understand, like, that hurts an economy when labor is expensive. Right?
Well, there's also not enough trades, right? So if there's not enough trades,
and that hurts an economy.
Yeah, it pushes the prices up because they can charge that, right?
Yeah. Which just means inflation, housing inflation specifically, because we're talking about housing renovations and costs and replacement costs. That's bad.
Bad. Yeah.
Now, I want to ask about what properties do you sell versus keep?
It's going to come down. So typically when I'm working, say I'm doing this as a joint venture. Sorry, excuse me. I'm doing this as a joint venture. Ideally, the first joint venture, I do it as a flip almost every time. The reason
In case
is
you want to break up with them?
Yeah, because you don't know what they're like until you're already working with them.
Right.
If you're in,
you don't want to be married long term to your JV.
No. Some people are
just
amazing.
in case. Some are amazing.
Some are amazing, and some of them you realize that this is going to shave years off my life. And some of them it isn't amazing. And it might not be that not them. Maybe it just doesn't work out between the two of you. Maybe you're two alphas and they need to control more. You never. It's always different things. But I usually will do a flip first. What was the original question? I gotta start writing these down.
How do you decide between selling or
flip,
keeping?
Yeah. So typically, first one is a flip. With the project. I usually run the numbers both ways, and we'll how to have the conversation with. Sometimes it works better certain ways. Sometimes it's my personal preference. Like I want to do a flip because I need some money for whatever else, right? I'm doing other projects and I need to, I'm anticipating like buying an apartment building in 6 months. So I'm going to like do some flips because I need to fund it. And I honestly, I invest in my own projects as well, right? It's good alignment of interest, right? To put your own money in as well. It's not just raising the money. So I'm going to make it work both ways. Sometimes it's going to be you've done seller financing, you have to do a long-term hold, right? That's the only way it works. If you refinance, you don't have that good financing anymore, so it doesn't make any sense, right? Same with the subject too. You got to be ready to be doing a hold, right? And the longer the better, right? So sometimes the strategy is going to dictate it. Sometimes it's the market that's going to dictate it. If you're looking at the projections and you think that this, because you can look, this will Google up, and you're like, some of the markets I work in, they anticipate a 3%, negative 3% appreciation rate in 2024. Some markets, they're saying 7% appreciation rate. So I don't build my stuff, any of my numbers, appreciation is not in my calculator, but I need to know where I'm at. I don't want to be going into something that's going to lose. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Mm-hmm. So those might be the markets you flip in. Some of the stronger markets like the Huntsville, Alabama, they're anticipating like that's the 7% appreciation this next year, when a lot of the US is saying negative. But they don't really know. It's all going to change. It changes in 1 second as soon as they change the interest rates. Yeah, everything changes. So, but anyway, you do your best to know and be ahead of stuff. You know what companies are coming in. So for instance, if you wanted to invest in Columbus, Ohio, the Intel plant is being built there. It's like billions of dollars they're sinking in there. High paid trades coming in from all over the world. High paid people to build these chips. So there's going to be good jobs. It's going to be good growth there. It depends on the market, right? What you're going to do. And in Florida, I only flip. Right. So I don't have any rentals in Florida, and people go, why not? And I go, well, it's because rent to value ratios. Right. So on like say $100,000 house in Ohio, I could rent that for like $1,200-$1,300 a month. Right. But $400,000 place in Florida, it's not going to rent for like $5,000 or $6,000 a month. It's not going to be above the 1% rule. It's going to be below, right? So you're going to have the $400,000 place that rents for $2,500 a month, right? So if I'm going to leave my money or leave some equity or whatever in the property, I want to make it in the market where I'm going to make the most, most cash flow, right? So I still want to be in all the different markets. People go, why do you flip there? Because it's incredible. Like flipping in Florida is incredible. It's a market that it's hungry, it moves fast, it gets appreciation, it's exciting, right? It's easier to get investors than do Florida because people are interested in Florida. People think they understand Florida, right? You still have to explain it to investors, but
they've been there before versus many people have not been there in other parts of America. Yeah.
If you say I have this amazing project in Cleveland, they go, okay, tell me about Cleveland. Why Cleveland? Why would we ever?
Drain's already left. It's over.
Yeah. You say that about Indianapolis, they're like, where is Indianapolis? Yeah. Right. So it's same sort of like, so it depends on the market. It depends on the area, but it also depends on what the strategy is right now. Like, so sometimes right now we're doing probably 50-50 burrs and flips for the single family stuff. But before we were doing 70-30 on the flips. We were doing a lot of flips last year, right? And it was just, we were taking money from flips and we were investing it in long-term holds, right? We weren't taking original money and putting it into long-term holds. We were taking profit and putting it into long-term holds. And so that way the investor always had all their money back, right? Which if you can do that strategy, you will have a lineup of people wanting to invest with you. If you're taking a lot of their money and holding it in projects, it's harder to raise the money because people want their money back. Yeah.
Glenn, we're running out of time.
Oh yeah, I've talked to you all day.
Oh, I can listen all day because I'm learning. I have like 1, 2, 3, 5 pages of notes. Glenn, you have a workshop coming up, or a tour, as you want to call it? Is it a tour that's going on in Florida?
Yeah, so we're planning. It's still in the planning process. We're probably thinking early February. We haven't put a firm date to it, but I'm in Costa Rica for the last half of January, so it won't be then. But or probably early February, we're going to do a property tour. I think we're going to start in Brevard County, Florida, like Cape Canaveral area, I want to see like a single family flip, a single family short-term rental, a single family burr. I want to see a commercial plaza, maybe a 20 or 40 unit apartment building, try and get a mix of everything, and then have some speakers to actually educate through the whole thing instead of just looking at properties. And I was also haven't firmed this up, but I was thinking getting a bus and then driving the hour and a half up the coast to Jacksonville and doing like one day in Jacksonville and one day in Palm Coast, because they're different. One's like a city, a massive city, and the other is like a beach town, right? So it'll have a different feel, different numbers. And some people are going to be more attracted to the beach town because of, personal part to it. More people are just, I want the apartment building in Jacksonville. So
well, less hard.
Still organizing that, but yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. And then you have a podcast, I understand.
Yeah, I actually have two, but
two.
Yeah, so I have a Canadian Investing in the US, which is the most popular podcast. And I also have the podcast Advanced Real Estate Investing Talk, which is just me, Ari, and Darcy. One's a syndicator, one's more into like small multis and mobile home parks. And then when we started this, I was all the single family guy or 1 to 4 units, and now I'm doing the big stuff too. But we just have a different perspective. We just do a talk show kind of thing. We bring up a topic, we all have a different idea on it, and we look at things differently, completely differently. So it's kind of, yeah.
And where can people find these? Where can people find more information on the Florida tour, on the podcast?
I haven't put in a website. I'll probably make something like glensutherland.com/PropertyTour. It doesn't exist yet, but maybe I'll make that today and put something coming soon or whatever. Or you can just email me, glen@glensutherland.com. 1 N in Glen. I'm not the double N. And then I'll just email you, or jump them on my list, because I'll probably blast it out on my list. It's on the website for glensutherland.com, but I'm not a big list builder. So if you're just as good just to email me, whichever works.
Fantastic. Glen, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for educating me and our 17 listeners.
I'm sure you got a lot more than 17. Thanks everyone for coming on the show. This was fun.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy that I personally use in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/YouTube to register for our next class. The link is also in the description as well. I publish at least 2 to 3 videos a week here, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. And if you're just starting out, feel free to ask questions and comment below, and I do the best to answer each of those comments and questions myself. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing from a professional investor, register for our next virtual class. That's at investortraining.ca/YouTube. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.